She served their food once. Now she signs their checks. It sounds dramatic, right? But it really happened. This is the story of how I went from being the waitress my parents teased to owning the restaurant they loved the most. Let me take you back a few years. I'd always loved cooking. Even as a kid, I would sneak into the kitchen to experiment with recipes, mix ingredients, and try to recreate dishes I saw on TV. My parents, however, had other plans. They wanted me to have a real job, something stable, something respectable. Being a chef or even working as a waitress didn't make the cut in their eyes. After finishing college, I didn't have a big plan, but I knew one thing. I wanted to be close to food. So I got a job at a local restaurant, starting as a waitress. It wasn't glamorous. I wore the uniform every night, took orders, served dishes, cleaned tables, and smiled through long shifts. But soon, my parents found out. One evening, they decided to have dinner at the restaurant where I worked. They didn't tell me in advance. I had no idea they were coming. The moment I saw them at the door, I felt a knot in my stomach. And then it happened. They laughed, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Look at you! Serving food in that uniform? This is what you do with your life?" My father said, smirking. My mother rolled her eyes. "I thought we raised you better than this." I froze. My cheeks burned. I wanted to disappear. All my hard work, my hours spent learning the menu, memorizing orders, serving customers with a smile, it didn't matter to them. To them, I was just failing, just embarrassing them. That night, I went home silently. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just thought, one day they'll see. And that's when the plan started forming in my head. I couldn't let their laughter define me. I wouldn't let their mockery dictate my worth. I decided that instead of fighting them in words, I would fight with skill, patience, and determination. I would take this restaurant and every other opportunity seriously. I would become someone they could never ignore, someone they had to respect. I didn't know exactly how I would do it yet, but I knew one thing. My uniform, my apron, and my trays would not be symbols of shame. They would be the tools of my future success. And so my journey began. Nights filled with orders, long hours on my feet, learning everything about the restaurant, the dishes, the customers, and how business really worked. Little did I know, the very people who mocked me would one day be walking through a door I owned, and they would have no choice but to see what hard work can achieve. The next few weeks after that dinner were awkward, to say the least. Every time I saw my parents, I could feel their judgment hanging in the air. Not even a "how's work?" Just pointed comments, small smirks, and occasional whispers like, "She's still serving food? Really?" It stung. I won't lie. It hurt more than I expected. But instead of letting it break me, I let it fuel me. Every shift, every tray I carried, every dish I memorized became a small victory against the doubt they planted in my mind. I began arriving early to learn everything I could about the restaurant. I didn't just want to take orders. I wanted to understand the kitchen, the management, the way the staff communicated. I shadowed the chefs, asked questions, memorized recipes. I learned how to handle difficult customers and even picked up tips on inventory and supply orders. Slowly, I started to notice small changes. Customers would remember me, ask for me by name. The manager noticed I was always eager to take on extra responsibility. And for the first time, I felt like I was building something, not just surviving a job. But it wasn't easy. The hours were long, my feet ached, my arms were sore from carrying trays stacked high with plates, and sometimes I went home exhausted, my uniform stained with sauces I couldn't scrub out. I often wondered if anyone would ever appreciate this kind of work. And then, one evening, it happened again. My parents decided to drop by without warning. I didn't know they were coming until I saw them in the dining area whispering to each other. This time, though, things were different. They didn't just glance or smirk, they stared, openly mocking my apron and name tag. "Still serving pasta? I thought you'd have a real career by now," my father said, loud enough for other customers to hear. I could feel the heat rise in my chest. The embarrassment, the shame, the desire to disappear, it all came back. But I took a deep breath, smiled politely at the guests, and carried on with my shift. Inside, though, I made a silent vow. Not with words, not with anger, but with determination. I would work harder. I would learn more. I would grow, and one day, the apron that humiliated me would be the symbol of my success. I started taking notes during breaks, reading management books, and even saving a little money every paycheck. I watched carefully how promotions were given, how top-performing employees were rewarded, and how a restaurant could grow. Every small detail mattered. Weeks turned into months, and my hard work started paying off. My manager noticed my dedication. I was promoted to a senior waitress, which came with more responsibilities and a small raise. But more importantly, I learned the art of running a restaurant, from the floor to the kitchen to the accounts. It was the first taste of control, the first feeling that I wasn't just being mocked, I was preparing for the day when mockery would no longer matter and success would speak louder than words. With every passing week, my skills grew sharper. What started as simple waiting tables became a full understanding of how a restaurant truly runs. I learned to read the floor, anticipate orders before they were spoken, and even help the kitchen manage rush hours. I spent extra time in the kitchen whenever the chefs allowed it. I asked questions about sauces, cooking times, and plating. I practiced late at night at home, recreating dishes until they looked and tasted just like the restaurant standards. My uniform, once a symbol of mockery, became a badge of commitment. Promotion came next. It wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. My manager noticed the dedication, the way I remembered regular customers, and how smoothly I handled busy shifts without ever losing my composure. I was asked to train new staff, manage scheduling, and even handle inventory orders. At first, I hesitated. The thought of taking on more responsibility was scary. But then I remembered my parents' laughter, the sneer when they saw me carrying trays. That memory gave me strength. I accepted everything, learning fast, making mistakes, and correcting them immediately. Soon, I began saving, not just small tips, but real savings, a nest egg for my future. I dreamed bigger than just surviving ships. I dreamed of owning something tangible, something that would not only support me, but allow me to make choices on my own terms. I started observing the restaurant chain more closely. I watched how each branch was managed, which locations were profitable and which ones struggled. I analyzed the business quietly, always thinking ahead. I wasn't just a waitress anymore. I was a student of the restaurant industry. Then I made a bold decision. I would invest in the restaurant chain. It wasn't easy. I had to calculate carefully, save rigorously, and learn about loans and small business investment. Every dollar counted. Every decision mattered. But I was committed. I wanted to create the position where one day I could make the ultimate move, not out of revenge, but from the place of earned success. Promotion after promotion, I moved closer to that reality. By this point, I knew the business inside out. I had learned how to handle staff disputes, how to deal with suppliers, and how to make a restaurant profitable even in slow seasons. Every skill I acquired brought me closer to a dream I rarely voiced out loud. And then came the moment when I finally had enough knowledge, experience, and resources. I approached the owner with a proposal. I wanted to invest in a branch of the restaurant chain. My vision was clear.
I wanted to help the business grow, manage it efficiently, and create an environment where customers love the food and the experience. The owner, surprised but impressed, agreed. I became a part owner of the branch I had worked at for years. The uniform that once symbolized embarrassment now felt like a uniform of authority and achievement. From that point, every decision I made was deliberate. I improved the menu, trained the staff in efficiency and customer service, and slowly began making the restaurant my own, not just in management, but in spirit. I was no longer just a waitress. I was a leader, an investor, and someone who had turned mockery into motivation. The skills I learned on the floor, the late nights in the kitchen, and the years of dedication all converged into the single powerful truth. Hard work pays off in ways that laughter and criticism never can. And deep down, I knew the moment was coming when my parents would see the full impact of that work. The very people who had mocked me, laughed at my apron, and doubted my abilities would one day walk through a door I controlled and realize, perhaps too late, that I had quietly become unstoppable.
Years passed. Every promotion, every late night shift, every dollar saved, every lesson learned, all led to this pivotal moment. I was ready to make a move that I had quietly dreamed about for a long time. It wasn't just about owning a branch. It was about taking the knowledge I had gained, the years of dedication, the deep understanding of the restaurant's operations, and turning it into something tangible. Something that would not only validate my hard work, but also silently prove to the world and to my parents that dedication and perseverance can achieve incredible things. I had been watching one branch in particular, the very branch my parents always visited, the one they raved about, the one they loved for its food, its staff, its charm. They had walked in countless times, unaware that years earlier, I had once served them there wearing that same apron they had mocked. Now the thought of owning it was thrilling, not out of revenge, but out of justice and self-fulfillment. I started the process quietly. I met with the branch owner, negotiated terms, and arranged financing. Every step was deliberate. I wanted everything to be perfect. There would be no sudden mistakes, no missed details, no chance for regret. The day I signed the papers, I felt a mixture of triumph, disbelief, and a quiet satisfaction. The branch, the one my parents had loved for years, was officially mine. The restaurant that had once symbolized my embarrassment was now a testament to my determination, my skill, and my patience. I didn't rush to tell anyone. I didn't post it on social media or call my friends immediately. Instead, I continued to manage the restaurant, improving systems, training staff, and creating a welcoming environment for customers. Everything ran smoothly. The business flourished under my careful attention. Then came the inevitable day when my parents walked in. They didn't know I had bought the branch. They just wanted dinner like any other night, expecting the usual experience, the usual service. The hostess led them to a table, and I was there, standing confidently at the front. At first, they didn't recognize me. My hair was pulled back, my uniform neat, my demeanor professional. And then they saw the small nameplate behind me, branch owner. Their faces went pale. "Mom, Dad, what is this?" my father stammered, trying to mask shock with authority that had vanished the moment reality hit. I smiled politely. "Welcome. Table for two?" I asked. They looked around, taking in the changes, the improvements, the efficiency, the warmth of the restaurant. And then it hit them. I was the owner. The very person they had mocked, belittled, and doubted was now in control. It was quiet at first. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's jaw tightened. They were speechless. I didn't gloat.
I didn't say anything sharp or vindictive. I simply served them, explained the menu politely, and let the experience speak for itself. Their laughter and criticism from years ago were meaningless now. The apron and uniform that had once humiliated me had transformed into symbols of achievement. In that moment, I realized that justice wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong with harsh words. It was about showing, through action, what hard work and perseverance can accomplish. And as they sat at the table, quietly absorbing the reality of the situation, I knew one thing clearly. Every hour I spent learning, every late night in the kitchen, every challenge endured had been worth it.
The silence that night carried more weight than any argument ever could. My parents sat there, surrounded by the hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the soft music playing in the background. But their world, in that moment, had gone still. For years, they had measured success by titles, by paychecks, by appearances. To them, a real job was one that sounded impressive to others. And serving food, working long hours on your feet, that didn't fit their picture of success. But now, they were eating in a place that I owned. Their idea of pride had been rewritten right in front of them. I could have said something sharp, something that reminded them of all the cruel jokes they'd made, how they used to laugh at my little waitress dreams, how they'd whisper to family friends that I was wasting my time. But I didn't. Instead, I just smiled, took their order, and treated them as I would any other guest. When I walked away from their table, I saw my father glance around, noticing how smoothly the restaurant ran. The staff worked like a team, the kitchen operated like a well-tuned engine, and customers looked genuinely happy. This wasn't luck. It was the result of years of effort, learning, and growth. Halfway through dinner, my mother finally looked up at me, her voice soft but trembling. "You did all this?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I did." Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, I saw guilt, not the kind that tries to defend itself, but the kind that finally understands. My father leaned back in his chair, his pride slowly melting into something more human. Regret, maybe? Or realization? When the bill came, I placed it on their table and smiled again. "It's on the house," I said gently. "Consider it my treat." My father looked up, still processing everything. "We can't let you." "You can. And you will. Because you've given me enough lessons in life already. This one's mine to give." They left quietly that night. No grand speeches, no awkward apologies, just silence. The kind that carries respect, humility, and a little bit of love rediscovered. A few days later, though, something unexpected happened. My father called me early in the morning. His voice was calm, softer than I remembered. "I was thinking," he said, "about what you built. You've done something special, something lasting. Your mother and we were wrong." I didn't say much, just listened. And then he added, "If you ever need any help with the business, you can count on us. We'd be proud to be part of it." That moment was worth more than any trophy, any headline, any financial success. It wasn't just about owning a restaurant anymore. It was about rebuilding a relationship, one that had cracked under judgment but could now heal through understanding. In time, they started visiting more often, not as critics or skeptics, but as parents, proud of their daughter. My mother helped with event ideas, my father learned a bit about the finances, and they slowly became part of something they had once mocked.
Eventually, I expanded to a few more branches. Business was good, but what mattered most was what it represented: a quiet victory, a story of patience, forgiveness, and the kind of success that doesn't need shouting to be heard. And yes, every time I saw them sitting at that same table, smiling and enjoying their meal, I was reminded of one powerful truth. Sometimes forgiveness is the strongest form of justice. Because in the end, love, when tested by hardship and misunderstanding, becomes unbreakable when it chooses compassion over revenge.
Over time, the restaurant became more than just a business. It became a place of connection, a living symbol of how second chances can reshape everything. My parents didn't just come for dinner anymore. They started helping during big events, greeting customers, even chatting with the staff. My mom, who once couldn't stand the sight of my uniform, started wearing an apron on weekends to help decorate tables. My dad, who used to frown when I talked about kitchen schedules, began proudly explaining to guests that his daughter owned the place. It was strange, but in a good way. I never imagined that the same people who once looked down on me would find purpose inside the very worlds they had dismissed. It felt like life had come full circle, not out of revenge, but out of growth. One evening, after closing, I sat with them at one of the corner tables. The lights were dim, the air smelled of garlic and fresh bread, and the sound of laughter from the staff filled the background. My father looked around and said, "You know, this place feels like home." That made me smile. "It always was," I replied. For a moment, we just sat there quietly. Years of misunderstanding, hurt, and pride had built walls between us, but somehow, without planning it, we had taken those walls apart, one shared meal at a time. Looking back, I realized how much those hard years had taught me. Every late night shift, every rude customer, every moment I felt small, it all prepared me for this. It taught me resilience, patience, and the value of believing in yourself even when no one else does. But it also taught me something deeper, that sometimes the people who hurt you most don't do it out of cruelty. They do it out of fear. Fear that your path is different. Fear that your success might not fit their definition. And once that fear fades, understanding begins. My parents didn't mean to break me. They just didn't understand me. And for a long time, I didn't understand them either. I thought success had to be proven through achievement. But in the end, success was about peace, about knowing you stayed kind when you could have been cruel, about choosing forgiveness when anger felt easier. The restaurant became a place where we all healed, a place where broken pride turned into quiet gratitude. And maybe that's what makes life so beautiful, that no matter how far apart people drift, there's always a chance to meet again in the middle. One night, a young woman approached me after her shift. She was new, nervous, shy, and still learning the ropes. She said, "I heard your story. It gives me hope. My parents don't support me working here, but now I feel like maybe I should keep going." I smiled at her and said, "If it makes you happy, keep going. People will doubt you until they see the result, and even then, some won't understand. But the ones who matter will come around." That moment reminded me of my younger self, scared but stubborn, tired but hopeful, and I realized something important. Sometimes your story becomes someone else's survival guide. Because every person who's been underestimated, every dreamer who's been laughed at, every worker who's been told they're not enough, they need proof that hard work can rewrite the narrative. My story wasn't perfect. It had pain, disappointment, and a lot of doubt. But it also had perseverance, quiet victories, and reconciliation. And maybe that's what makes life worth telling.
Because in the end, it's not about showing off your success. It's about reminding others that even if you start small, even if no one believes in you still have the power to create something beautiful, something that one day, even your harshest critics might respect.
A few months later, we celebrated the restaurant's 5th anniversary. It was a small gathering, just the staff, a few loyal customers, and, of course, my parents sitting in the front corner table they'd claimed as theirs. The lights were warm, music soft, and laughter filled the room. I stood near the counter, looking around, trying to absorb every detail. The aroma of roasted garlic, the sparkle of glasses, the clatter of plates in the kitchen. It all felt unreal. My mom caught my eye and smiled, holding up her glass. "To my daughter," she said, "the one who never gave up, even when we didn't understand her." Everyone cheered, and for a moment I felt tears well up. It wasn't about the money, the success, or even the recognition. It was about this, the quiet acceptance that had taken years to grow. After the celebration ended and the last guests left, I stayed behind to help clean up. My dad joined me, wiping down tables. He was quiet for a while before finally saying, I used to think being a parent meant protecting your child from failure. But watching you, I realized sometimes we need to let them fall, because that's how they rise." I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw pride, not the kind that demands perfection, but the kind that respects effort. He continued, "You taught us more than we ever taught you." I smiled softly. Then I guess we all learned something. As we locked up and stepped outside, the city felt peaceful. The streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement after a light rain. My mom linked her arm through mine as we walked to the car, and my dad hummed softly beside us. That night, I thought about the long road that had led here, the painful dinners, the lonely nights, the quiet determination that pushed me forward when their words hurt the most. If I had given up back then, none of this would have existed. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same restaurant where they once mocked me had become the bridge that brought us back together. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just my victory. It was our healing. Every time I saw my parents laugh inside that restaurant, I felt a little piece of my younger self finally rest. The version of me that cried in the back room after being humiliated in front of strangers, she finally got peace. And it made me realize something that I'll carry forever. You can't force people to believe in you. You just have to believe in yourself until they do. Because when you do, your strength speaks louder than their doubts. Months later, I expanded the restaurant brand. We opened a second branch, a cozy café with open brick walls, soft music, and an atmosphere that made people want to stay. This time, my parents helped with the opening. My father designed the sign himself, and my mother handled the flower arrangements. When we stood in front of the new place, taking pictures, I thought about that first day I wore my uniform, nervous, embarrassed, but determined. I could almost see that younger version of myself standing nearby, smiling through the tears, saying, "We did it." And maybe in a way, we really did. Because sometimes the most beautiful victories don't happen with applause. They happen quietly, in moments of understanding, forgiveness, and love. That's when I realized the real success wasn't the restaurant. It was the transformation that happened in our hearts. The girl they once laughed at had not only built a business, she had built a bridge. Years later, people still ask me how I did it. How I turned humiliation into success and anger into peace. But honestly, there wasn't a single magic moment. It was small steps, quiet ones. It was choosing to show up when I wanted to quit, choosing to learn when I felt lost, choosing kindness when I had every reason to be bitter. Because success isn't just about money or status, it's about who you become while no one's watching. I think about that a lot, especially when I see young workers come through my doors. Some of them remind me so much of myself. Nervous, under pressure, trying to prove their worth to the world. And sometimes I pull them aside and say, don't worry about who doubts you. Just focus on the work. One day, the same people who look down on you will look up to you. They always smile politely, probably not realizing how deeply I mean it. But I know one day they'll understand, because experience teaches louder than advice. There's something powerful about doing the thing people say you can't. It's not revenge, not really. It's redemption. It's proof that belief, discipline, and a quiet fire inside you can turn even the smallest dream into something real. I used to think my parents were my biggest critics, but in truth, they were just the first people to test how much I really believed in myself. Their doubt pushed me to define my own strength, and that's something I'll forever be grateful for. Now, when I see them sitting by the window in the restaurant, laughing over dessert, it feels like the perfect ending to a very long story. Not a fairy tale, something better, something real. The restaurant is more than a business now. It's a symbol, a reminder that pain can be the soil where purpose grows, that even the hardest beginnings can bloom into something beautiful. Sometimes I close up late at night and walk through the quiet dining room, lights dimmed, the smell of coffee and garlic still lingering in the air. I touch the counter, look at the empty chairs, and whisper a quiet thank you for the journey, for the lessons, for the strength that struggle gave me. Because without those moments, the embarrassment, the rejection, the heartbreak, I never would have found out what I was capable of. I learned that success doesn't have to shout. It just has to last. And maybe that's the real message behind this story. You don't need to prove yourself to the world right away. You just need to keep going long enough for your work to speak for itself. When the people who once doubted you start asking for your advice, that's when you'll know you've made it. So if you're listening to this and you're in that season of doubt, if people are mocking your dreams or telling you your work doesn't matter, remember this story. Because one day you might look back and realize that the pain you're feeling now is the same force pushing you towards something incredible. Let them laugh. Let them doubt. Let them underestimate you. Because when you finally rise, it won't just be success, it'll be peace. And peace, my friend, is priceless. If this story moved you, watch the next episode. You might just find another piece of yourself in it.